Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Podcast, with your host Nick Myers.
Artificial
Intelligence,
voice recognition, machine learning,
robotics,
actionable analytics.
It is Nick's goal to help everyone understand how AI and voice technology are reshaping our lives both personally and within organizations. Your glimpse into the growing world of AI and voice first starts now.
Nick Myers.
Nick Myers. Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
Welcome to the Artificial Podcast. My name is Nick Myers, and I am here to help break down topics in emerging technology, artificial intelligence, and voice assistant tech to help everyone understand how these technologies are impacting our lives both personally and within our organizations. The Artificial Podcast is brought to you by Red Fox AI. Red Fox AI helps give brands a voice by leveraging the power of AI and voice assistant technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant. If you or your organization is interested in sponsoring an episode, please send an email to the Artificial Podcast at redfox-ai.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere that you stream podcast episodes. You can also follow the Artificial Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for the Artificial Podcast. You can join our brand new Facebook group exclusively for listeners of the show, where you can meet other artificial podcasters from around the world who are interested in emerging technology just like you. A link to our Facebook group has been included in the episode notes. Thank you for listening, and now a quick word from our sponsors before we jump into this week's episode. Hey, Brett, you know something that has really been bothering me lately?
What's that?
Well, ever since the pandemic began, grocery shopping has just become a chore. You know, sometimes I just need the basics and don't always want to have to run to my local grocery store, putting myself and others at risk of catching this virus.
Yeah, I know what you mean. These days I really try to avoid grocery shopping unless I absolutely have to. I just wish there was a way to get the basics I needed delivered right to my door.
Well, Brett, I think I may know of a new service that can help us both with this problem. Have you heard about Blue Fox Box?
Blue Fox Box. I can't say that I have. Can you tell me a bit more about it?
Sure, it's actually really cool. With Blue Fox Box, you can order the basic groceries that you need when you need them, delivered right to your door. The neat thing about Blue Fox Box is that the items in their boxes never change, so you always know what you're getting every single time, which helps save you time from having to pull up a mobile app, individually select each item that you need, and then check out.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and even better, you can order your Blue Fox Box just by asking for it using Amazon Alexa and soon Google Assistant. Imagine placing an order for the groceries that you need in under 30 seconds and having them delivered to your door in 1 to 3 business days.
Okay, that sounds pretty sweet. How can I learn more about placing my first order now?
Well, you can learn more and place your first order by heading over to bluefoxbox.com or by saying, Alexa, launch Blue Fox Box using any of your Alexa-enabled devices.
Sweet. Alexa, order me a Blue Fox Box.
Well, that was quick.
Blue Fox Box. The groceries that you need when you need them. Now available exclusively in Madison, Wisconsin.
Hey there, artificial podcasters. Welcome back to another week and another episode of the Artificial Podcast. This week, I am excited to welcome Tim McElreath from Discovery Inc. to talk about all of the cool things that he's been able to work on at Discovery, specifically the Food Network Kitchen Alexa skill. And Tim and I were able to connect a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just really fascinated by his background and the different things that he's been able to work on. So here we are doing a podcast episode, of course. But before Tim and I start chatting, let me tell you a bit about Tim McElreath. Tim is the Senior Product Manager for Voice and Emerging Platforms for Discovery Inc.'s direct-to-consumer team. Tim has been working in the conversational design and engineering space since 2016, leading various teams in building voice, chat, and multimodal applications for brands like Food Network and HGTV. Tim, welcome to the Artificial Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Nick. So it's a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And kind of as I alluded to in my little intro here, I mean, just some of the things you've been able to work on, especially what you've been working on at Discovery and with Food Network. I think I can safely say that a lot of people who listen to this podcast have more than likely experimented with that, or at least have heard about it in some way. So I'm really excited to kind of open up the curtains here and dive into some of the things you've been working on. But to kick things off, what has your career journey been like so far, and what led you to ultimately working for Discovery, specifically in the voice and conversational design industry?
Well, I've been in in technology for a long time now, since the late '90s is when I first started. Back in the web browser war days. I originally have a background in art and design, and throughout the '90s, sort of gravitated toward programming and engineering, and since then I've been in a lot of different places. So I've done some consulting. Worked for financial services for a long time, both as an engineer and as an engineering manager, and then. A few years ago, I decided to move away from financial services and experiment some other fields, and did some work for music publishing. I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank for a little while.
No kidding.
And then did some work for digital agencies, which actually was a lot more fun for me because it allowed me to get a little bit more closer to the user interface, and working directly with product managers and product designers. And then about 5 years ago, I joined Scripps Networks, which was the parent company of Food Network and HGTV, as a architect for foodnetwork.com. And that was kind of a lot of fun. I got to look at food all day. Which
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, the only problem with my job is I am always hungry. It gets to be a problem. And so I was working on foodnetwork.com for about a year, and back in early 2016, our product team sort of came to me, and they had a project. They didn't really know what the scope of it was or how long it was going to last, but it was they were in talks with Amazon to build out an Alexa skill for Food Network, because if you think way back to the days of 2016. The Echo was really starting to kind of hockey stick in terms of adoption.
Yeah.
It even, I assume it even took Amazon by surprise how quickly people were kind of drawn to this device. And so they were naturally looking for, more recognizable brands to come on the platform to start developing for it. And so we, initially I thought this is probably going to be like a 6-month project, build something for this experimental platform, and just see where it goes. But I initially was attracted to it just by the newness of it, like the fact that we didn't really know how users were going to engage with the device or with brands on the device, what usage patterns were going to look like. It's the openness of developing something really new that didn't have a lot of precedent to it. So I kind of jumped at that opportunity, and within about 3 or 4 months, in 2016, we had started building for Google Assistant for Google Home, which was coming out that year, and also for chatbots for Facebook Messenger. So as we started doing these in parallel, it started to look like we should start building a team around this, because this is starting to feel more like a trend.
Yeah.
It's not a toy, it's not a novelty. Our product team, was very forward-looking, recognized that this is probably something that's going to be important. We just don't know how it's going to be important yet. And so we started building a team around it. And also we started thinking about how do we support multiple conversational interfaces through our set of existing services. Like, how can we use our content management services, systems? How can we use our API services to start delivering content to something that's not a website or a mobile app or social? Because there's overlap, but it's not really a fit. So we started trying to build out ways of building common services across all of these conversational platforms. And this was, again, back in 2016, where tooling for voice was just starting out. So a lot of that stuff we kind of had to build ourselves. And it was working with any kind of emerging technology is the double-edged sword. It's a whole lot of fun, but it can be really frustrating because you're essentially building. I always say it's like renovating your bathroom in a house where they're still building your cellar.
That's a great analogy.
Um, and there's a lot of conversations with Amazon and Google and Facebook around like, how do we build these things? And they said, I don't know, just try it this way. And we had a lot of ideas and more failures than anything else, but there were always interesting failures.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, by the end of 2016, we had built for all those platforms, and we tried to build it in a way that was adaptable in case other vendors jumped in, which kind of happened later on with Cortana. And we just started iterating on that. I think one of our goals for our team, while we recognized that we weren't really going to get a ton of user engagement, right? Because this is still something where you're still trying to convince the user of the value,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not going to get the same engagement as a FoodNetwork.com or the Food Network mobile app, of course. But what we set as a goal is how do we maintain the partnerships with the platforms so that we can sort of participate in the conversation on how these platforms develop, and how can we kind of try to be first out of the gate when new features come up, so that
Mm-hmm.
we can get an understanding of how voice and AI is evolving over time, get those internal learnings, and be able to take advantage of opportunities as they come up. So we did that, from 2016 to early last year, when a fairly big opportunity came up for us, and that was Food Network as a brand. And at this point, we had been acquired by Discovery, so now Food
Mm-hmm.
Network is part of the Discovery suite of brands.
Mm-hmm.
And our product and engineering leadership and our corporate leadership, again, looking forward, saying how do we evolve a brand like Food Network into something that's more than just linear TV shows?
Yeah.
How do we take all that content and deliver it on different platforms, adapt it so it can be used on different platforms, and build a different model for how people engage with it? So the answer we had for that was a product that we have out now called Food Network Kitchen, which is essentially it's a freemium product, right? If you were using the Food Network app prior to the launch of Food Network Kitchen, all the recipes, all the content you had before is still there for free, but we added additional content to sort of entice people to become subscribers.
Yeah.
And we were thinking about how do we create content that's not necessarily TV shows, or not necessarily video on social, or some of the other traditional channels we're publishing through.
Which I'm sure is a very interesting challenge too. I would have to imagine, based on where kind of the content has always been for, a network like Food Network.
Well, it also involved like taking a step back and thinking about what do people need from a brand like Food Network, and not necessarily thinking about the constraints of how we're currently delivering it to them. So, people want to feel more comfortable in the kitchen. People want to be able to, access new ideas in cooking. People want to have cooking instruction readily available. They want trusted information, and they want to be fun and engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we had all of those pieces together. It's just a matter of how do we organize it in a way that is better for people to experience.
Right.
So we have a couple of new content types. So we took a look at how do we sort of extend the idea of a recipe into something that's more of a learning experience. So we have what we call on-demand classes, which are basically video tutorials by a chef. Sometimes it's our premier on-air talent. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's the in-house experts we have at Food Network. That will not only walk you through a recipe step by step, but also give you some context as they're making the recipe, which is actually
really neat, and that's like a whole new immersive experience, really, I think.
And we were thinking, modeling it on some of those education platforms. So instead of just being food entertainment or information, how do we build something that really works as a learning tool or an education tool? And another content type is, what if we got into live broadcasting? And I think we were initially looking at at Peloton as an example. So, for example, if you're taking if you're taking a cycling class, a video cycling class is perfectly serviceable if you're just trying to get the exercise.
Yep.
But there is something about experiencing a live broadcast and experiencing it with other people and having that interaction.
Yep.
That makes it like a really unique and delightful experience. So our idea is, how do we bring that over to cooking? Like, if you're experiencing a cooking class or a cooking demonstration with somebody like, with some Bobby Flay or Michael Simon or Giada live, and you're able to interact with them, and how much more delightful can that be than so watching a TV show or
Absolutely.
watching a tutorial? So we decided to add that as well on top of the other content types. So now we have this kind of range of things, from traditional recipes to TV shows to step-by-step classes to these live experiences, which I think kind of covers how people may want to cook particular recipes at any given time. And the other idea behind Food Network Kitchen was, how do we bring this across multiple platforms so that it's not just a mobile app, or it's not just on your connected TV or on the website. So we decided we partnered with Amazon to kind of figure out how we make this like a really good cross-platform tool. So the idea was that we bring this on to Fire TV, we bring this on to the mobile platforms and Fire tablets and like iPads, and then we also bring it onto Echo Show simultaneously. So instead of our voice strategy becoming a kind of siloed R&D group that develops individual apps, it gets integrated into the entire product strategy.
Which is really smart. I think that's a really good strategy.
Yeah, and in doing so, we had to start thinking about, well, how does it fit in? So we needed to come up with some sort of a vision statement for how we see Echo, the Echo line of products fitting into the overall Food Network Kitchen experience. And how do we build tenets that help us make decisions on how we prioritize what experiences to build on that platform. So initially, we were very kind of targeted about how people are using Food Network Kitchen in the Alexa ecosystem, so that we could build kind of the highest value features first, and then start thinking about how to expand out from there. So the first tenet is, for us, that we be very specific about where people are using it and the situation in which it's being used. So we're still in the process of focusing on an Echo Show, a multimodal smart screen on a kitchen counter being used as a cooking utility. And that allows us to really start making decisions about what features do we bring over to that platform that's really going to make the biggest difference in customers' lives. And it also lets us come up with a vision for what the product is. It is a cooking assistant that allows people to make the food they love, make their tried and true recipes, learn new skills in a way that doesn't interrupt that kind of flow of cooking. Because I think what we want to communicate is the kind of the fun and enjoyment of cooking once you start acquiring those skills, and to have the technology not get in the way of that. I'm used to using mobile devices or tablets when I was cooking, bringing up recipes, and that was a better way than some of the old scribbles I used to have, or digging up cookbooks or things like that.
Yeah.
But there's still some friction in trying to say, keep your phone on while you're making a recipe and washing your hands every 5 minutes. and it felt like there's always this hurdle whenever I did something, that there was a technology step involved that sort of interrupted that. So we were looking at those moments to say, how can we make those easier so that people could focus on cooking and not have to focus on, a digital interface. And that's where voice really kind of shines for us. We can design an experience that can be viewed from 4 to 6 feet away on the kitchen counter. We can make sure that we're providing enough information over voice that won't necessarily distract customers from what they're doing, and also give them the information they need at the moment they need it, and no more than that. So they're not kind of pulled into that digital interface in a way that sort of interrupts what they're doing. And also, how do we kind of facilitate cross-platform journeys? So, for example, if somebody's watching Ina Garten on a TV show on their Fire TV, and they like those recipes, like, what's the easiest way for them to talk to that interface, say save those recipes, so that later on that evening they can go over to their kitchen and just bring up their saved recipes and start making it.
Yeah.
Or how can they carry over a class that they may have sampled on their mobile device while they're commuting, or and being able to pick that up on their kitchen counter.
Yeah, I'm really glad you dove into all this, because I think what you have been building for Food Network Kitchen, or at least taking it from app and some of these other different platforms onto voice, is really fascinating, because when you think about the nature of what content you're trying to serve with Food Network Kitchen, you really have to think about the situation more than anything else. And I know Amazon released the whole situational design concept, and I even personally been getting into more of that myself. But when you really start thinking about the situations for the content you're serving, I mean, I can only imagine just even having to put yourself in, like, okay, I'm this person in the kitchen, this is the problem I'm having in this moment. All right, I want to use Food Network Kitchen to help get this recipe, or engage with a chef or something like that. And I mean, then it can even be a different situation where you're in your bedroom and maybe you're just looking for recipes, or filling out your grocery shopping list or something like that. So I think this entire story that you've shared about how you have gone about creating this, I'll go ahead and say, just, I think, totally different type of experience on voice for Food Network Kitchen, I think is something that a lot of people who are listening to this are going to get a lot of value from, because, and I think this goes into another question that I actually have, where, you're taking a really hard look at the multimodal aspect of this by leveraging, the Echo Show and APL and some of that stuff. What are your thoughts overall on multimodal experiences for voice? Do you think more voice app developers, designers need to consider multimodal as a core part of the voice app experience, or do you foresee maybe multimodal as only being a temporary thing in the evolution of this technology overall, based on the different things you've been working on?
I think multimodal is it's going to be a permanent fixture. And not only do I think it's like multimodal voice first devices, like the smart screens, but multimodal is seeping into existing devices like mobile and TV.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, like I have a Pixel phone, so that's essentially a multimodal device, because I use Google Assistant on it all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
I use, if I'm watching Fire TV, I use the Alexa interface to get content all the time. So that also is a multimodal device. So there's kind of a transition between something that you think of as being like a haptic device, a touch interface like a mobile that has voice capabilities, and things like a smart screen, which you think of as being a voice first device that maybe has some touch or visual components, but is not primarily a touch visual device.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to thinking situationally. What is the problem the customer is trying to solve, the task they're trying to complete, or the information they're trying to get at that particular moment? And if you think very specifically in terms of what is a user doing at that moment, I think it becomes easier to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how you can deliver that
Definitely.
information. in a way that's most appropriate. One thing I love about the voice interfaces is, from my point of view, it feels like the goal is really to get out of the customer's way as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which I think is a really valuable trend in technology.
Yeah.
If we're thinking about, smartphone usage, continuing engagement, delivering advertising, continuous scrolling. I don't know if anybody else, occasionally logs on to something like Twitter and ends up spending a half an hour longer than they intended to.
Guilty.
Maybe it's just me, but that kind of use case isn't really very very well supported on voice interfaces. Voice is really a terrible advertising platform.
Yeah.
Because people want to get their the value with a voice interface is, how do I get this done in a way that's fast and feels natural?
Yep, as quickly as
Let
possible.
me go on with the next thing, which delivers value in a couple ways. One, to get your task completed, and it also gives you your time back.
Mm-hmm.
And the digital interface doesn't interfere in the flow of your life. And that's really what excites me about designing for these platforms, is that becomes one of the first priorities. Like delivering value without interference in customers' lives.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. And I think that's something that, I think when I first started working with voice platforms, I couldn't help but think of it similarly to something like mobile or other tech platforms that we've had for a while. But as we've kind of gone through the trials and tribulations ourselves with some of the different things we build, I think you're spot on when you say that it's entirely different in the fact that it's a technology that is meant strictly 100% to make somebody's life easier and give them the result as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I think, if we're looking at creating experiences or all the different lingo out there, experiences, voice apps, whatever, the ones that are truly going to succeed are the one that can solve a problem within, matter of seconds for folks. Or like the case of Food Network Kitchen, where somebody is specifically wanting to learn a new recipe while they're in their kitchen, or maybe want to hop into a live stream that they know is already going on. They can do that instantly because of what you've done with the multimodal aspect and the ability to solve that problem so quickly in the fashion that you have. So I think you're really on to something with that. And I really hope to see a trend in voice moving forward where that is more of the mindset, where it truly is just solving fast, easy, quick problems for people in the moment and trying to predict the situations that they're going to be in to encounter that problem, and how voice can best solve that. So what has it been like then? You talked a bit about Food Network Kitchen and some of the stuff you've done at Discovery, but for a media company, what has it been like working for a media company in voice, and how do you think that compares or differs maybe from other industries that are currently experimenting with or that are thinking about deploying voice?
I think for a brand like Food Network, one of the big challenges is, how do we incorporate both the technology side and the product and product design thinking around voice into the overall practice.
Mm-hmm.
Conversational designers. There's a lot of difference between somebody who's a digital designer on a design team and somebody who does conversational design. There's overlap, but there's also some additional skills that have to be brought into that practice. And how do we start making sure that when we're doing sort of design sprints where we start to ideate on features, how do we bring voice into that conversation so that as we start thinking about features, we can start thinking in parallel about how these can move out to, all the entire ecosystem of, voice first devices, from multimodal screens to headless speakers to wearables to IoT to auto to and looking for opportunities in that space up front, so that when we start thinking about an overall product strategy, that becomes part of it. And then we can start designing our content and our API systems and all the services that go along with it, with that in mind, so they don't become tacked on at the end.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that again as well. And maybe maybe one of the advantages I was thinking about, for a media company is the variety of content that you can get your hands on and repurpose, I think, effectively to specifically the visual voice platforms. Like, how has it been, like, when you did some of the content that was video based for a chef preparing a meal or showing somebody how to make a recipe? Was that content already existed and you repurposed it, or has the focus been making specific content just for, say, an Echo Show 5 screen or something similar?
Right. So it's a little bit of both, because we have a pretty deep library of content over the
Yeah.
last 25 years or so. But like, not all of it is formatted in a way that makes it accessible easily by AI systems. There you have to build taxonomies around it and metadata, and some of these weren't really designed for that in mind. But we do
Yeah.
still want to be able to surface it. And with Food Network Kitchen, we're putting a lot of effort into creating new content specifically for these devices, and and content that can be navigated both on like mobile and TV devices as well as through voice.
Gotcha.
So we're thinking about we're at the point where we're thinking about voice navigation in the content production stage, and not just in thinking about it when we're planning on delivering it.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I was going to
But
say, I would think, even though you have access to so much content that already exists from different things, I would imagine you'd have to reframe that at some point to these new platforms, just because the technology behind it is so different, and even just, like the time span within a piece of content and how we consume that is a bit different. So that's really interesting. It's interesting to see you guys are actively reframing that. I think that's really cool. So in our
we're
first,
also looking.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry. We're also looking at content, say, like, are there short form videos
Yeah.
or excerpts from shows that we can then pull out that answer specific questions that we can associate with metadata, say,
Mhm.
if somebody asks how to do something or how something is made, is there a way that we can kind of pull out excerpts from these as a way of answering these questions as well?
Yeah, no, that's real time feedback too that you're getting from users, which only helps you optimize and make the content better to make it a more robust experience. I think that's really, really smart. So in our first meeting, a couple weeks ago, I know you talked about how you envisioned what Discovery and Food Network is doing with voice as potentially becoming, a model or a platform that other voice app developers and designers can reference in the future. So I think it would be really valuable if you could maybe dive a bit into that. And how do you envision voice at Discovery, and maybe just even in media in general, evolving over the next few years?
Um, well, I mean, a lot of this is my own speculation. I know we work very closely with Amazon, but I
Yeah.
can't speak for them. So this is purely like my own kind of wish list for how the voice platforms evolve over time. I when we were building out Food Network Kitchen, this involves kind of new content templates and ways of interacting with content that are new for the Alexa platform. Live broadcasting.
Yeah.
This step-by-step video tutorials, and some of the other kind of deep integrations we have in the Alexa platform. Go outside of what we traditionally think of as skill building. There's integrations with content experiences that exist across brands, like the step-by-step recipe experience. Exists for a number of brands on the Alexa platform, and we plug our content in there as well. We deliver television episodes through the video skill, which is a standard content
Mm-hmm.
template that a number of video providers use. And then we've kind of moved beyond this concept of traditional skills that's kind of built as a monolith that has a single language model or interaction pattern, into this kind of hybrid approach where some of it's first party content ingestion, some of it's using a video skill, some of it's building out new content templates. I think we're going to see more of that.
Yeah.
And my hope
Agreed.
is that the tools for building experiences on Alexa starts to get a little bit more flexible over time, and not just Alexa, but I don't want to pick on Amazon. Amazon
Yeah, every voice platform needs a bit more
because
flexibility.
I think all the platforms are kind of experimenting with this. Because the biggest mistake I think we as a team made when we started out, which I think is very common, is we thought of a skill or an assistant agent or a chat bot as being an app on a platform, like a mobile app.
Mm-hmm.
We treated it like mobile apps.
Yep.
And over the last few years, it's become clear to me that the customer model for the interaction is fundamentally different than that. If you think of an app on a phone, the operating system is kind of a neutral platform.
Yeah.
It's just a way of getting you to the app, and then once you're in the app experience, it's completely controlled within the app. The app model isn't really the way people think about voice assistants or assistive technologies.
No.
We're not just building voice; we're building assistants. And the assistant model is a little bit different, where the platform becomes a mediator, and it's always, I always think of it as, it's always the interlocutor that delivers content through the platform. So I think from, whether it's Alexa or Google Assistant, when a customer is talking to Alexa, they're always aware that they're talking to that service.
Mm-hmm.
And the boundaries between the assistant and the content provider is not nearly as hard-edged as it feels on mobile or tablet or TV.
Well, that's an excellent point, I think, because you're right. Because like iOS or Android, that's just the OS that gets into the app. But the moment that app opens, you're in that experience by that developer, that brand. Because you have the visual component, you have all the colors, you have the sounds, you have everything. When you're using a voice platform, you inherently know that at any given point, you're still using Alexa. You're still using Google Assistant. You're still using Bixby. So I agree with you. I think the customer model is just entirely different, and is something that definitely needs to be thought about a bit differently, I think.
And you still have access to a lot of the services that the platform service provides. I mean, one of the things I love about making recipes using an Echo Show is that as I'm using the recipe, which may be a Food Network content, I can then also access the timers. So if I need to set a 5-minute timer, I can do that. It doesn't interrupt the recipe. I can play my Spotify music as I'm making the recipe, and it I don't have to switch between them.
Yeah.
And I can use native features like reminders or things like that. I actually think mobile is kind of edging toward that as well, where a lot of platform services become available and intermix with the third-party experiences.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely, and I think this is just a trend we're going to continue to see, because I think that's ultimately where customer preferences are shifting, and it's really interesting to see how, with different pieces of technology that arrive, how that customer journey changes. And again, I truly think you're spot on that it's just the thought process. Even myself as a user, I can attest to that. It's just so different when you're using a voice assistant platform. Now, with that in mind, what are some tips, tactics, strategies, whatever they may be, that you can share with any voice designers who are listening to this, or anything that you've tried using that may have not worked, like things that have worked, things haven't worked, in a tips, tactics, strategies based format?
Yeah, as I think I mentioned it before, if we wanted to do a conversation about things that haven't worked, we could do an entirely different podcast on that. I come up with one example. Like when we first started building in the Food Network kitchen skill, one of the features we had was a TV schedule search. You could find out when a particular talent or a particular show was going to be on TV next, or what was on earlier that day if you wanted to get the recipe and all of that. And that was kind of an enormous undertaking. Certainly like time-based search querying, that's a big language model. To build out. And we found out pretty quickly like how big a task we had set for ourselves. And we built it out. And probably about 6 months later, we dropped it completely because people just weren't using it. Because I mean, if you think about it, if you have a TV, you're probably using your you're probably using other methods to get that information. And it wasn't like a primary use case that was going to drive customer engagement. And I think we had, first of all, we had gone down the mistake of trying to have feature parity with our website and mobile apps, and just say, if it's a feature on the website, we're going to port it over one to one as much as possible. And it's not always the appropriate feature or the appropriate priority. You know, we weren't focusing on customer needs as much as we were focusing on what could be done.
Gotcha.
And I think one of the tenets we have now is we have to be clear on how voice adds value to an existing process, and how we can demonstrate to customers that, you know, an existing process where they're using a phone or some other digital interface, which was easier than the prior method of doing something, still has that friction that they may have, you know, like through habit, become accustomed. Yep. So, you know, if you take, for example, you know, like using your phone to look at a recipe, you know, there's a lot of benefits to using a phone over a bunch of pieces of paper and cookbooks and things like that. But there's still this friction that people have just become accustomed to over time. And you have to kind of look at, you know, whatever domain you're in or whatever problems you're trying to solve, be very specific about those areas of friction that you're solving for, and focus on those relentlessly.
Yes, that's a tip that I will champion until the day I die, because it's true. It's about solving the problem for the customer at the end of the day. And to your point again, not every feature that's existed in something else necessarily needs to be ported over to a platform like voice, because it's just so different.
Yeah. And one other thing we try to keep in mind is this is a new platform and people aren't accustomed to it yet. So we have to be very careful of not overwhelming them with these features. You have to assume that people are going to have to take time to habituate themselves to using a voice or a multimodal platform to do something that they were using another type of device before. I think back to 2007 when the iPhone was first announced, how long it took me to really get accustomed to using the interface of a smartphone.
Yep.
And you don't think about it anymore because it's second nature, because you use it like 35 hours a day. But it did take a while to get used to that. And the original set of apps available on iPhone, look really primitive compared to what.
Oh my gosh. Looking at like the original weather app or the original notes app or something like that, it's so strange.
Yeah, but if you were to give a 2007 user a contemporary smartphone, it would be difficult for them to use because it's so feature rich that they'd be overwhelmed with the amount they'd have to learn.
Yeah,
and I think there's that same learning curve has to happen on voice as well. So what we're thinking about in our domain is how do we get people to do simple tasks and get them comfortable doing it and see the value of it, and then build on top of that, so that we're not trying to force them to change too many habits at once.
Yeah, I think that's a really good strategy. And, I have even folks in my family who have recently got them, and I think that's one of the things they're concerned about. I ask them, well, why aren't you using this as often as I thought you were? Oh, well, it's just something else I have to learn. And of course, for me, it's like, well, what do you really have to learn? But, to a couple of the points you just made, it is still something that people have to learn. And overwhelming people with too many features is going to turn them off, with the snap of fingers, essentially. So I think a slow burn in terms of features. Features are great, but when you're in an emerging market right now, or before you even hit mainstream, I think it's really crucial. I agree with you to not overload people with too many features.
Yeah, and how do you build a bridge between the things they're comfortable doing to the things they're not so comfortable doing that may provide value later on? So,
yes.
if you already have, if your brand or your utility or whatever you're building already exists on another platform, how do you use that and your existing customer base and kind of bring them over to this new interface, kind of slowly, feature by feature, so that you can avoid the problem of having to kind of build a new customer base on a new platform is there ways you can actually, do those cross-platform journeys so that you can leverage the work you've already done and say, this feature now has something that you can carry over to a voice interface, and you can do this particular journey in a way that feels, easier, more delightful.
Yes, I think those are excellent tips and tactics and everything, and definitely something if you're listening to this and you're a practitioner in voice, or you're a strategist or a designer, I mean, all the tips that Tim just shared are things that we really are going to have to start thinking about more as these platforms evolved and users start really demanding a seamless, easy, robust experience that doesn't overwhelm them, because that will completely turn people away, and of course we don't want that. But Tim, this conversation has been so incredible. I've learned a ton, and I really appreciate you sharing all your thoughts on everything, really. But as we kind of wind our conversation down, I always leave on this one question: what is one thing that you think someone can do today to begin leveraging voice, either personally or within their organization?
I would actually, I'm a big believer in actually using the things that you're interested in. So I always look at any brand that's experimenting in voice and try them out. Like any voice feature that you see on a mobile device or on a smart screen or on a speaker, try to see if that actually adds value. For example, I pay attention to how I interact with technology during the day, or at least I try to, and really look at, is there a better way of doing this thing I'm doing right now? Like, is pulling my phone out of my pocket and looking up something really the easiest way, or the way I'm just accustomed to? And is there an opportunity there to make that process easier and feel more natural to the user, where we don't feel like we're compromising the way we think or the way we interact in order to, adapt ourselves to the limitations of a digital interface? And once you pull out those opportunities, then look around to see is somebody trying to solve that problem. And if they are, how are they doing it? And really taking a look at, how does it work? How does it integrate with their brand or their utility? And is it solving that problem, or is there still work to do? Or even better, if there's nobody solving that problem, then all of a sudden you have a business opportunity. Yes,
and especially right now in the state that we're in, where again, as we talk about living through this pandemic, as terrible and and awful as it is in many ways, so many different opportunities have now presented themselves, specifically when we start looking at voice assistant tech, AI, IoT, all these different pieces of emerging tech. There are now holes there with problems that need solutions. So I think that's excellent advice that you just shared.
Great. Well, it's always great talking to you, Nick.
Yeah, that's why I know when you and I chatted a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, man, I got to get Tim on a podcast, because we could just go and go and go. And I feel like even though we're at 42 minutes here, we could probably go for another 42 minutes and even 42 beyond that. But yeah, it's been an excellent time getting to chat with you, Tim. And if anybody wanted to reach out to you or contact you, what are some of the best ways for them to do so?
You can find me on Twitter. It's Tim McElreath. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Tim McElreath. Fortunately, I have a unique enough last name that I'm usually pretty easy to track down.
that's always a good thing. That's always a good thing, right? Especially when it's people are trying to locate you on the different social platforms. Well, Tim, again, it's been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat here and share all your knowledge on voice and what you've been working on at Discovery with the listeners. And I can't wait to keep in touch and chat again soon.
It's been a pleasure.
Artificial
intelligence,
voice recognition, machine learning,
robotics.
You've been listening to the Artificial Podcast with your host, Nick Myers. To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. To learn more about how your organization can benefit by unlocking the power of AI and voice, visit www.redfox-ai.com. Until next time.